I'm Devora, and I'm going to wish you all a good Yantif or Chag Sameach, because actually today is considered the most holy day on the Jewish calendar. Tu B'Av, which stands for Tesvav, the 15th of Av. It's considered as holy, if not holier, than Yom Kippur. So this begs the question, why on earth is it so holy? In fact, the only thing that's brought down in Jewish law that we do on Tu B'Av is not say tachana, not say the certain things that we don't say on holidays, like sinful admissions. But otherwise, we don't do anything except for have, great Zoom classes. So what? And the Torah brings down all the amazing events that happen on Tu B'Av, but nothing seems to really match up to the other great holidays that we have. Why is this day? It's like the number one mystery. Why is this day so holy? So one explanation is, which leads us right into what we're going to talk about. Tu B'Av is the day, the number one thing that happened is the day that the Jewish maidens, the single girls, would dress in white. It's kind of why wardrobe choice is what it is. They would go into the fields and they would kind of present themselves and dance, of course, in a modest, beautiful way. And the young men, the single men, would kind of check them out, and matches were made. So this is considered a day that symbolic of love and relationships and marriage. So what does this have to do with it being the greatest day? So I'm going to take the my favorite analogy that the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, brings. He says, why is a wedding the most joyous experience? There's something about a wedding, besides for the bride and groom, for everyone present, there's something about a wedding that is just electric, and it does not get old, right? We love weddings when we're little girls, and we continue to love weddings. That feeling when you dance with the bride or when you dance with the groom, there's just something so magical about it. So the Alter Rebbe says, why? What's this joy? Imagine two best friends that have not seen each other for a year. And in Corona, we can actually, we know what this feeling is like. I remember seeing, people after a few months. It's so exciting. So imagine those two best friends. They see each other after 6 months of quarantine. That excitement and that enthusiasm when they reunite is just electric. Now take two best friends that have not seen each other for 10 years. One of them was locked behind the Iron Curtain. And then they reunite. Imagine that reunion. And then take two best friends who have not seen each other from the moment they were born. And they reunite. That is what the bride and groom with the chassan and kala are under the chuppah. They're two souls. They were one in heaven. And under the chuppah, they reunite into one. It's two best friends actually fully seeing each other again. And that is the joy that you see at the chuppah and that every person present feels. And that's perhaps why Tu B'Av is considered the greatest holiday, because that's what's happening. That's what it represents, this fullness of our soul. A person has 3 stages when they receive their Jewish soul. 1, when they're born, and for a boy, it's actually at a bris. They look a little different after the bris. They look a little more Jewish. 2, at their bas mitzvah or bar mitzvah. And 3, at your wedding. That's when you really become complete as a person. So that's the joy and that's the specialness of what marriage represents in Judaism. And that's why today is so special. We get to tap into that energy, and hopefully it will come into fruition for all of us. And I want to say that I wrote into the Rebbe asking for a bracha that this should go successfully today. And I specifically indicated that all participants should find their shidduch in a clear and quick manner, and that everyone that's married should have shalom bayis. So may the Rebbe's blessings come to fruition. Thank you all for joining, and I'm going to hand over the floor to Adam.
Awesome. Devora, thanks for the intro.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here. Chag Sameach. And obviously a special time of year. And I guess I may as well introduce myself. I'm currently staying in Bergen County with my parents for the time being throughout this pandemic. I'm very involved in Chabad, always have been. And keep a kosher home. Judaism and holidays are very important to me. And before I guess we go into the Q&A, I guess Alyssa should introduce herself as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Alyssa. I was looking through, I think most of you, actually no, I don't know everybody that's here. So nice to meet you for those of you who I haven't met before. And I see some people that I just haven't seen in a while, so that's nice too. I'm Alyssa, here in Manhattan, my apartment on 57th Street. Chag Sameach, everyone.
So, Devora, as far as meeting your significant other and your loved one, how do you know it's the one, and what are the indicators, and what do you look for, and what should others look for?
Very good. So it's kind of important, you know, since we're not God, God's the only one who's perfect and knows everything exactly. So you're never going to really know 100%, but you're going to know almost 100%. And the way you know that is, first of all, it's not instant. You grow to that knowledge. Second of all, we believe in marriage as a full package. So it's not just about the feelings. Feelings are critical. You should have feelings for the person you're going to marry. But first, you have to make sure that there's a practical, this is someone you're building a life with, right? If you're building a home, you're not going to hire, you know, an accountant. An accountant is great, but if you're building a home, you're going to hire a contractor. So to build a home with somebody, you need to make sure they have the qualities to build a home, especially with you, with similar values. Then there has to be compatibility on other levels. And of course, there's feelings. Hashem uses our body, and Hashem uses there's signs all around us, and we just have to pay attention. I said this example last time. Let's say you date a girl or you date a guy and everything lines up, but after like going out, 8 times, you get nauseous at the sight of seeing them, not because they're ugly. There's just something there. That's Hashem telling you something. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the person. It just maybe is a sign that you shouldn't go out, that you shouldn't continue to go out. So it's a combination of that practical. This is a contractor. This is somebody I could build a home with. And I have a feeling. People say, I know. There is something inside of you that says, I want this. And that's the tools that Hashem gives us that we should indicate. But that being said, always get a blessing from a higher power. When the Rebbe was alive, the way that Hasidim, when they were ready to get engaged, they had that conversation, and then they only announced their engagement after they both wrote in a letter to the Rebbe. And because it was such an important issue, the secretaries would always call back right away and say, yes, the Rebbe agrees. And once they got the consent, that bracha, because no matter, even if we're doing all our part, we always need a blessing from above. Nowadays, unfortunately, until Mashiach comes, what we do is we go to the OL. I remember I once took a group of girls to the OL. Carly Krasner, I'm going to say this about you. And when we got there, she's like, oh my God, this is where all the only Simchas pictures are. There's a website where they post engagements. So all the Chabad engagements, that's the first picture, is at the OL, because that's where they go to ask Rebbe's blessing. So practical connection, emotional feelings connection, and then making sure that you seek Hashem's bracha and blessing.
Awesome. And going forward, what would you say is the most challenging part about dating for both sides? What are the challenges that people face when they're dating?
I think in general, dating is the most frustrating part of life because, let's say, raising children, right? That's the stage I'm in now. It's very hard. It's one of the hardest things you're ever going to do. But you know the trajectory. You know that, yes, day in and day out, I'm going crazy. The kids are, there's so much to do, but I know that they're going to grow up. I see the nachas. Even with the hardships, you know where this is going. In a marriage, you know where this is going. This is the person I'm building a life with. Yes, we had a little ruffle today, but we're going to work through that. With dating, you have no idea. You don't know if right now the person I'm dating is the one. You don't know, am I going to meet him in 6 months? Am I going to meet her in 2 years? The unknown of it, I think, is the most frustrating part. And that's, I just want to acknowledge that. That's really, really the most difficult part of dating that I see.
So as far as going off of the unknown aspect, what kind of choices can we make in our lives in order to enable us to find our soulmate instead of just like agreeing to go on dates? What kind of other things can we do?
Very good. First of all, go on in intentional dates and with as much knowledge, right? Like find out about the person before, etc. Be like kind of calculated and smart about your dating. People think that when you get married, all of a sudden they're gonna like figure it out. Start preparing for marriage before you get married. So part of that is being the best you. You want to, a lot of people say, oh yeah, when I'm married, that's, want to live a Jewish life. Start living a Jewish life now. Prepare yourself to be it's actually the number one thing that you can do, because the truth is that God is really in charge of who you marry and when you marry them. But the one thing that you really should take control of is being the best person to be in a married relationship. That's something that you should start right away and not wait. Alyssa, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. I should have said in my intro about myself that I'm a graduate of Devora's dating school. You were here
My
last
prime student.
Just probably why you so willingly asked me to join today. Should I roll back to the first part of that question, maybe? Adam, what was like the first part of what you asked to Devora? Because it's sort of like built up toward.
Yeah, I was just talking about some of the choices that people can make in order to, be proactive and find their soulmate.
Yeah. So I feel like there's kind of, I would almost see that in like two pieces, because one part is like the practicality aspect of like, do these things. Then the other piece is sort of just like, I think it's more of just like an overall state of mind. So in terms of like choices, I mean, Devora, I'm sure you remember, like one day I pretty much like marched myself into Devora's apartment and sat down on her couch and I was like, I'm getting married. Like, I'm going to get married. Let's go. And so I think just trying to put out, I don't want to sound too cliche, but just putting out like a certain kind of energy of like, I know that my soulmate is somewhere. He might be here 30 blocks up, which mine was, or he might be across the country or in another country, who knows? But just putting out like that kind of energy that you know you want to get married, you're ready to get married. If you're not, you should get yourself in a place where you feel like you are ready to get married. But then I think like in terms of tangible and practical things, like a really great example is somebody that I know just texted me last week and said to me, hey, I just want to let you know I'm in a space where I'm very serious about dating right now. Do you know anybody for me? And kind of listed like a couple of things that they were looking for. And this is someone that I have known for several years. Here and there have chatted about dating amongst other things, but like now this person is in my brain and I'm thinking about this person. And so I think that's like a practical thing that you can actually do, is like to reach out to people that you know and to ask them, if someone comes to mind, this is something I'm serious about, and like, do you have a setup for me? So amongst other things, but yeah, there's like the tangible practical piece of like, do these things, and then also the overall like state of mind and sort of like vibe that you're putting out into the universe.
So going off of what you said, Alyssa, what kind of advice do you have for somebody once you set them up with another person, or Devora, what kind of advice do you give them and what do you encourage them to do prior to going on a date, prior to seeing them in person for the first time? What would your recommendation be?
So are you saying like, just to clarify, how to like so somebody sets you up with somebody and then it's like, what do I do from here?
Correct.
Okay.
What are like some probing questions that, like, for example, like if it was me, I would ask like, okay, like, first of all, like, where does this person live? Like, I want to obviously make sure that they're like in the remote area, because I'm not looking for the long distance doesn't appeal to me. Secondly, like, what school do they go to? Thirdly, like what do they do? What's their job? Like, those are all things that matter to me. So like, what kind of probing questions do you expect people to ask, and what other things prior to going on a first date would people typically ask?
Okay. So, I mean, I can just like speak from like my own experience. Thank God I was very fortunate to be set up or offered to be set up with people. And I had a lot of friends and family who kept me in mind. And I think the first thing is like just to really thank Hashem and have a grateful attitude when somebody does that, because when someone calls you and says like, oh, I had someone in mind for you, you really have to thank Hashem for that, because Hashem put that into their mind and said to them, okay, maybe this person is a match for this other person that you know. So I think firstly, it's just an overall grateful thing. Now, even if that person sets you up with someone who like, it wasn't a good fit, it's always about just like staying positive and staying grateful, because who knows, that person may have another somebody that comes to mind for you, okay? So when you get the phone call or you get the text and somebody says, oh, I have this person that is in my mind for you. Of course, like you're saying, Adam, like you want the shakedown on who the person is. But I think more so, like it's a little more about you. Like you have to know what you want. And that was one of the things that Devora helped me with a lot, was kind of like coming up with, right, Devora, like for lack of a better term, just like a list of, she had said like, this is your first homework assignment that day. I popped myself on the couch, like come back to me next week, 3 to 5 things that are kind of like your non-negotiables.
Non-negotiables, exactly.
So when people reached out to me and said like, oh, I have this person in mind for you, it was a little bit easier for me to like know whether I thought that person could at least be someone I should speak to on the phone and then go out with them, because I had a sense of what I wanted. I think a big problem with setting up is that oftentimes the way that people get set up and the reason why people don't feel grateful or happy about it when they should is because it's like, you're Jewish, you live in New York City, you both have a pulse, so let's set you up, right? And it like, it doesn't really work that way. So yes, like some people are gonna be more thoughtful and careful about like how they do that. Like Bobby and I will sit and like agonize over like, should we pair these two people up? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And some people are just kind of like, okay, I think like this could potentially be a match. So you have to take it for what it is. And like, yes, you should be open-minded to things, but you do need to know what you want so that you can sort of identify pretty quickly whether this person fits the bill. And I would highly recommend doing a phone conversation before going out in person with that person. I've heard like a lot of times from people, they'll say things like, oh, I can tell in the first 10 seconds whether like this person is right for me or not. It's not something that I totally agree with, but if you feel like you're going to make a snap judgment on someone and you like can't get yourself out of that, you really should speak to the person at least on the phone. Because I think it also, like if you've seen a photo of them and you feel, yes, you should have like a physical attraction to them. So if you feel like, okay, this person is like pleasing to look at for me, then have a chat with them for a few minutes and like see if you can sort of start to whittle down and find out whether the things that they've got are sort of what you have on your non-negotiable list. So that would be like a couple of things that I would say to do when somebody is trying to set you up.
I like what you said about showing gratitude. Like, it's so nice for the person that made a suggestion for you to say thank you to them. First of all, it's just a tactical move because they're more likely to think of you in the future, right? Nobody wants to deal with people that are ungrateful. But also it's like for you a mindset like, yeah, so they were totally off the mark. It doesn't matter. They thought of me and thank you. I love that point. It's a good way to go.
Yeah, and I will say, like, on the flip side of that, there have been situations where we have set people up and, like, okay, maybe it didn't work out, first date, second date, whatever, however many dates. And, like, I never set someone up. I even say this when I set people up, like, you don't need to call me and say anything to me. This didn't now become, like, you have to tell me all the gossip and the juice about, like, what's going on in your relationship. In fact, I'd probably rather not know, to be honest, unless, like, I'm the person that you're coming to, because I do have certain friends, and I did the same with like 1 or 2 of my married friends were like my go-to person that I would speak to aside from Devora. And, you know, sometimes you will do that and it's like, okay, if it didn't work out, you can still pick up the phone and say like, you don't have to even say it worked out, it didn't work out. Just to say, hey, I'm really appreciative that you did that. And it's not because I need my ego to be stroked, but Devora, like, I think it is a tactical move. Like, when somebody does that, you're more likely, the person who's setting you up is more likely to think about you in the future. So yeah, I think it's also just like a smart thing to do.
It's also a good practice for marriage because you should never take your spouse for granted and you should always say thank you to them. So, all right, Adam, what's next?
So how would you advise your friends, this comes from one of our viewers, how would you advise your friends who complain about like, oh, I'm single, I'll never find someone. And on the flip side, like they also have like a very strict set of criteria. I know you mentioned, Alyssa, the non-negotiables and the other criteria. So what advice would you have for friends of yours that are like not very open to, you know, going on dates and not putting themselves out there and making those choices to make themselves available? What would you say to them?
Certain things are not allowed to be on the non-negotiable list. For example, you cannot have blonde hair on your non-negotiable list. Sorry, it's not an option. You cannot have, I was going to say tall or short. If a girl's really tall, it's okay if you don't really want to go out with a short guy. But, like, be open-minded. Certain things, you know, you go over it with somebody and make sure they're reasonable, because sometimes they're not reasonable. And of a cute story. So there was a woman who was having a hard time finding the right one, and she was speaking to the Rebbe about it. And this was in the earlier years of the Rebbe's leadership, so more conversations like this were able to happen. And the Rebbe's like, well, tell me what you're looking for. And she said, I want someone tall and handsome and kind, energetic, introspective, respectful, successful. And she went on and on and on and on. So the Rebbe smiled and he said, it looks like you want to marry more than one person. So a non-negotiable list does not mean that you created a person, right? Like you're like a cartoon caricature. You created the person, you know exactly what they look like. You know exactly what's in their heart and mind and everything about them, even what they're going to say. This isn't a movie script that you're writing. That person, if you invented and created such a person in your mind, that person does not exist. Take a gun and shoot it. It does not exist. The non-negotiables are just a smart way to keep you on track, right? Back to my example before, a contractor will look for contracting work. He's not going to go apply to a hospital medical job. So a non-negotiable are things like a sense of humor. You really have a hard time with people that don't know how to laugh. A non-negotiable is somebody that keeps Shabbat. This is a critical part of my life, and if they don't keep Shabbat now, are they open to keeping it in the future? A non-negotiable is certain health standards. You know, I have a lot of this health in my family. It's something that I'm really conscientious of. That's something I'd really like to veer away from. That's completely legitimate. Alyssa, any other examples of a non-negotiable?
Yeah,
a very intelligent person is going to have a hard time building a relationship with someone who's more, you know, ditzy. So certain things like that are completely legit. Do not have more than 5. Honestly, 5's too much. Maybe 3. 3 to 5. That's it. Work on this. You can send it to me or someone to make sure it's good. And honestly, it can change too.
What about like somebody who's passionate about their career, whatever it may be?
You want someone who's someone who cares about their work and isn't just doing it like because they have to make money?
Yeah.
Why would that be something that's important? Just like spell it out for me a little more.
Because my opinion is that people who are passionate about their career, they're motivated. They tend to be more organized. They have a goal, like they have goals set out for them. If a lot of goals set out for them, if they're passionate about their career, they can like have a vision of what they see in the future for themselves. As opposed to like somebody who's doing something that they don't really enjoy, which we all run into things that we don't enjoy, but we all have our passions. So, or just passionate about things in general.
So I'm happy you brought that up. That was a really good example. I like the other things you said. I like that somebody goal-minded, someone who has drive, someone who's organized, someone who's motivated. Those things are very good. Someone that's career-driven is a little bit closed in, and I want to say something right now. Women, for men, their job, and by the way, there's a Torah source for this. For men, their job and their work actually kind of like identify them. That's what they're going to feel good about. That's honest. That's the job that God gave them to do. Now, a woman might feel really good about her job too, and women having strong career paths, gesundheit, enjoy, hatzlacha, good luck. However, for the most part, women find more tremendous satisfaction, similar to a man in his job. Women find tremendous satisfaction and feel complete when their relationships are strong and things like that. and God willing, when she's a parent, that's going to be a very critical part. So I can envision a woman who's extremely motivated, driven, goal-oriented, and organized, yet chooses to make her home a priority. She might also have a job, but that might not be her passion. So I think it's actually a very important distinction. And to be honest, Adam and everybody else listening, when you get married and have a family, you're going to want a woman that's going to make that a priority. You know, it's very hard for people when the wife is so career-oriented that the most important parts of her life get a little bit neglected. So does that make sense?
Yeah, but I also think that maybe what gets overlooked here is that like their career could be being a mom. So like,
okay,
just
very good.
them being, yeah. So like if they're, I guess what's labeled today is like full-time mom, which where they're raising their kids and spending all day with their kids and putting them first, that's something that also like fits that criteria or that mold for me.
Fantastic criteria, completely acceptable. But like when I hear passion in their career, I hear something different than that. And that's why it's good to go over. So that was a great example.
Yeah, I think like talking it out with somebody is really important. And I don't even think I need to say the example of what this is for it to make sense. But when I did go back to Devora and I sat down with her and we're like talking about for like the uber picky person who's like, just has like this laundry list of things that, you know, they need to have and whoever it is, or they think they need to have. When Devora and I sat down, there was one thing that I had mentioned to her and she was like, you really went up against me with this particular thing. And we kind of like went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until we whittled down sort of like what just happened here very briefly of like, what is really at the heart of the thing that you're talking about. And I will tell you that I still have in my phone, I have like a note where it has like what those 5 things were. And yes, I agree, Devora, like the 5 things is like a stretch to find, like you name 5 and you find all 5. Even I always mention Dr. Jack Cohen, he's like all over Torah anytime and set up one of my friends with her husband. He's fantastic. You should definitely go listen to him. He does it in a little bit of a different way. He calls it like a top 10 list. And he says, you should have 10 things knowing that like you'll get 5 of them, right? So it's not this idea of like, I'm gonna name these things and I need to find every single one of these things. And if I can't find those things, then on to the next person. There is no like exact science or systematic approach, but I will tell you that I would come back from my dates and obviously just like on a personal note, the one I like remember the most is the one that I ended up marrying. And I would like lay in bed after the dates and I would look at those 5 things on my phone and I would go through them and like really have a conversation with myself of like, where am I at on the continuum here of like understanding where this person is with this thing on my list. Okay. So for example, like one of the things that was on my list that was really important to me is someone who is just has simchat chaim, is like an overall happy vibe, good energy, warm, like that type of thing.
That's a very good one.
Thank you. Do you owe it? By the way, that was my top 1. And then the rest of them, like it was like a no particular order situation. And I kind of don't like to say like what they are anyway, if anyone was going to ask, because I feel like everyone should come up with like it influences you and you're like, oh, that's a good one when you hear it.
100%.
Okay?
Go with your
So
gut.
if anyone wants to still simchat chaim, go for it because it's like, especially I think husband or wife, like both sides, you really want someone who has like that more.
Joie de vivre. Joie de vivre would be the term.
Yeah. And so I would, you know, there are certain things like that particular non-negotiable that you're kind of like on a first date, are you really going to know that about somebody? You know, so like it takes time. You're almost like a researcher and you're kind of like collecting information as you go. And again, I don't want it to sound like it's so systematic and that you're just checking boxes because it's not that, but it's kind of like a thing that grounds you that you're able to, like I said, lay in bed at night and say like, where am I at, you know, with these things that I'm looking for? And it's like, if the person doesn't have whatever that is, then can I live with that? Am I okay with that? And sometimes the answer to that might be yes. But if you're noticing that like you don't really have enough information on all of these things, it might be that you just need to date that person more or kind of spend more time with them. So for the person who is out there that is like there's this new Indian matchmaking show on Netflix. I don't know if anyone's seen it. And you listen to this thing, and it's literally a girl. She lists like 50 things to the shotgun that she like wants in a guy, and it's like, are in the least judgmental way possible. But are you nuts? Like that doesn't like the Rebbe said, it doesn't exist. You're kind of like creating, and when you start doing that, it's like you're building your own wife or your own husband, as Dr. Jack would say. It's like you are taking a little bit from this person and a little bit from that person, and I like her looks and I like her family and you're putting it all together, and like that's not a person. So you have to be real with what your list is and what your non-negotiables are. And I think really to kind of like take a step back and say, are my expectations just like off the charts, or am I living in a fantasy land, or is this something that is like real for me? And if you're not sure, you should talk about it with somebody. Like, don't try to do that all in your head. It was hugely helpful for me to have Devora, and then 2 of my girlfriends who are married, which to me looked like they had the beautiful kind of marriages that I would want to have. And like those were the 3 people I spoke to about it, and it was beyond helpful to just have them as resources to like hash all of that out.
I want to add 2 small things. Number 1, remember you're not perfect either. And that's okay. So you're not going to marry somebody perfect. 2 imperfect people together make a perfect marriage. Number 2, yes, you have non-negotiables, but be fluid. When you meet somebody and they're like, wait, I thought I really needed this, but now that I'm meeting this person, maybe it's not as important. That's great. That's totally fine. The real only non-negotiable is that the other person's Jewish. Somebody asked a question about, because I brought up health being something that you can consider. So it was private, so I'm just gonna mention that. So it's not it's a personal thing. It's not like a black and white across the board. If somebody has a serious health condition, of course you could say it's worth it. You're amazing. You're my soulmate, and I'm going to be with you all the way and supportive. But you also, no one can hold it against you and say it's just something I can't handle. Like that's okay too. It's hard, for the person that has that health condition, it's hard, but they have a basher too. But when you're dating, you're allowed to say to yourself, you don't have to be rude to the person, but this is something I just can't handle. Or you could say, you know what, yes, it is. So it's just something that you have the right to make it a real consideration. You're not obligated to go into a marriage knowing that somebody has something very serious that they're dealing with. On the other hand, you totally can. So it's a personal thing. Once somebody's married, though, this is a completely different conversation. When somebody's married, you are with them 100%. First of all, everyone's going to have issues, whether they're medical or whatever. Once you're married, you are each other's, in sickness and in health. We don't say that under the chuppah, but it's 100% the case. And you absolutely have to be there for the other person. Halacha does say that if after 10 years the couple doesn't have children, they're able to. Halacha allows for them to get divorced. They don't have to, but it's a good enough excuse or reason to get divorced because it is important to have children. Again, thank God we have so many options these days, and that's usually not the route people take, but it's interesting that Jewish law does give that, but that's only once it's really been tried. All right. So hopefully that answers the question. All right.
What type of advice would you have for, like, a lot of us, either, like, I lived on the Upper West Side, some people live on the Upper East Side, some people live, like, call it Murray Hill, Soho, different neighborhoods, and we all seem to, like, overlap with a lot of the same people. We have, like, friends, we're exposed to a lot of the same groups, and let's say you go out with somebody and it's not right for you, and you end it, and then you see somebody who, like, they know. And a lot of people are so hesitant as opposed to overlapping with friend groups, because, like, I would recommend somebody to a friend and then be like, well, I know their friend, or something like that. And it seems that in the city, like, because we have such a huge Jewish community, which is such a beautiful thing, and so many people know other people, it seems that it almost becomes a conflict when it comes to dating and meeting others.
That's such a good thing you're bringing up. It happens all the time. Or even friends themselves don't want to go there because it'll ruin whatever. So this goes back to, I think, what we discussed last time. If it's a priority, then friendships come second. And if it's a priority, if you see, it's actually a beautiful thing when a guy and a girl met in a more casual friend way and then they realize, hey, this could be something more. I think that's incredible. I know a lot of people that met that way, and kudos to them for taking the plunge. Yes, it might be awkward, but is it worth it? If you're going to possibly meet your bashert, I think we have to get over that a little bit. If this is priority, then it comes above more than your social circles and events being awkward. That's what I think.
Can I add on to that? There's like, I think the flip side too, which is interesting, where sometimes it's like, because all the social circles overlap in the city and it is like a small Jewish world in a weird way here, there are a lot of circumstances where someone will try to either suggest somebody and you'll get this answer that's like, well, I know that person already. And it's like, okay. So, and there's also the situation where, you might know somebody and maybe you feel like you've known them for a little while, but like, did you ever consider dating them? Dating them is like, it's different than just like knowing them from hanging out at Kiddush once a week on
Or
Saturday.
did you ever sit down and like have a conversation with them?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's like both sides. It's like avoidance thing, but there's also the like, okay, the people you know are great people for you to be dating. You know them. They're in the same like planet as you, doing the same.
It makes so much sense.
You might have a lot of things in common with each other. Not that those are like the things that make you decide that one's the one, but like there's a good chance that, that maybe somebody that could be somebody for you. So don't be so quick to write somebody off, I would say, just because you like know them or your friend knows them.
Right. I want to say something else really important, especially because we're, all interlinking circles, but even if not, it's so important that you don't talk about the people you dated because, unless there's someone who's, the criminal, then make sure your friends don't go out with them. But like, don't be like, oh my God, he's such a stupid thing, whatever. Because your friend might end up dating that person. And because of your negative comment about them, they might not go for it. And that would be such a shame, So like, you don't have to keep it a secret who you went out with, even though I kind of do recommend that. It shouldn't be public knowledge necessarily in the beginning, but definitely don't badmouth other people. There's a high chance that someone is going to end up, being introduced to that person, and they're going to have in the back of the head, but wait, my friend who I really like said this about them. Maybe they are a bad person, and it really can get in the way of potential matches. So that's something to be careful of. I got a private comment about the health thing, so I just want to comment on that. Don't be quick to jump either, right? Let's say you hear that somebody has or has dealt with cancer. Find out more. Maybe they've been in, some cancers are deathly, some are, there's just so much information. Don't just jump to conclusions because you heard a word. And remember that we have to be, you never know what package it's going to be for that person. So I feel like you're, legitimately can do research and find out, but do research. Don't just jump to a conclusion because you heard one thing. Of course, it's a very sensitive topic, and I'll just mention, not even connected to dating, but in general, if Hashem gives you such a challenge, you must be the most incredible, strong person, and just send all the love and encouragement and strength to somebody like that. And hats off. I'm sorry anyone has to deal with such a terrible thing. Mashiach should come right now and wipe away any struggles. But till then, anyone dealing with that is an incredible person, and we're humbled by you and send you a lot of love and strength. Okay.
So Alyssa, how can you tell if you're dating someone and it's time to move on, and what are some ways how would you recommend doing so?
Okay. I think for some people, this is like harder than for other people. Maybe just
definitely a mental challenge, like figuring out how to move on.
Yeah, and also of course, like, after like maybe one or two dates, it's obviously in a way like easier to kind of let something go than if you're in a situation where it was a longer thing, there were more things involved in it. For me, like, I think actually it was pretty clear. I'm thinking of like one specific instance. It was interesting because like there was a situation where I did explain to somebody with like, I thought concrete reasons after just like maybe 3 or 4 dates, why I felt like, you know, it wasn't for me. And the person was like very shocked and blindsided and like didn't really feel that same way. So I think like, how do you know? Devora, I don't know how much you'll agree with this piece or not. I'm not sure what you'll say, but like for me, there is like a gut thing. Like part of it is, you know, you have a certain feeling about something sometimes. Maybe it's like a woman's intuition, but I think there are a lot of men that have gut feelings about things too. But I really did try to be very careful in thinking about something before just letting something go. And I guess it really is probably like the same answer, Adam, that I gave before, because that non-negotiable list was really helpful for me. Like in that case, I just felt like the things I was looking for, by that point I had, after like 4 dates or whatever it was that I said, I kind of had enough information to know like, okay, it's not really like stacking up. It's a great person. It just wasn't like fitting sort of what I felt I needed for myself. And so that was how it was pretty clear. So again, I think it's really about like knowing yourself and what you need and what you want. And then maybe you can use that as a tool to kind of help you reflect upon whether like this should continue. Because this is an added point, when you do know, like you want to take care of that and go on to the next thing, because it's just because it's like nice to have someone around at your birthday, or you have this event coming up and like maybe the guy's this or that and I should bring him with, like, don't do that. It's wasting your time. It's wasting the other person's time. And you should just like have this trajectory of like, I'm Devora, what's your line? It's a destiny. It's a dating. It's a destination. It's help me here with how you say it.
It's a journey to a destination. It's not a destination in
Like,
itself.
go to the destination. If you know it's a wrap, then like let it be and go to the next thing. And hopefully the next thing is going to be what Hashem is sending you to be your partner.
But I think Alyssa is hitting it on the nail. You have to first know. You have to be confident in it being a no, and being confident that it's okay that it's a no. Because of course it's okay. You're not rejecting the person as a person. You're rejecting them as your spouse eventually. And just being very respectful and clear to the other person. Of course, they might not be on the same page as you. Is it lovely when it's mutual? It's fantastic. Does that always happen? Not at all. Remember that even if they feel a little rejected or insulted, it's much, much worse to string somebody along and to be clear with them. So you just have to be clear and respectful. Definitely lay on their great qualities and what you admire about them. And, you know, sometimes you could tell them why. But honestly, if it's going to be insulting and if it's personal, you don't have to. You don't have to say, you know, you have a really, really ugly nose. Like, it's not a mitzvah to tell them that. I hope that's not your reason for breaking up, but I'm using that as an example.
But,
you know,
Laura, can I just also say, though, because we didn't, I don't know if you had mentioned this in one of the classes, but I sort of said it earlier, you do have to be physically attracted to the person also.
Eventually.
Yeah, and that might happen on the first thing, but like if that is your reason, that you like just for whatever reason find this person to be like, there's something like cringy about it, then like, and again, you're not going to tell the person that because, you know, why?
There's no reason, right?
It's just cruel. So yeah, but I think that could be if that is like the energy.
I agree.
Then
I agree, as long as that's not like the first 2 dates, you know. But yes.
Great. So many of us are like surrounded, we're in different circumstances, different points in our lives. Like some people date in different ways. Some people go to a bar, some people meet at Central Park, some people prefer going to a sports game when that was applicable. That being said, at what point do you know, and what are like some of the pros and cons you should look for besides your non-negotiables as far as like setting up dates and being like open with somebody? Like on top of your list.
clarify for me one more time. I want to make sure I answer what you're asking.
So as far as like, there's almost a dating culture these days. So like, what can you do to like avoid being avoid like being a part of that dating culture and like stay true to your values, other than that like non-negotiables list? More clarification?
Well, I'll give you, I can say like a quick personal story and you can tell me if this like sheds any light on what you're asking.
Okay.
After my bust in Devora's door and saying I'm getting married episode, and I made that clear to everyone that I knew, and you know, people were reaching out to me and wanted to set me up. It was like shocking to me how many people would say things like, after they would ask me what I was looking for or whatever, and I would explain, and they would say, why are you looking for someone who's shomer? Do you know how hard that's going to be to find somebody like that? Or like, oh, you recently, like at that time I had maybe like less than a year before, I was really trying to just only eat in kosher restaurants out. So I, you know, people would ask and they would be like, don't like, are you crazy? You're never going to find somebody who like also is like that too. You should be like trying to almost like change what I needed. Now I happen to be giving examples that have to do with like just how you live your life in the way of Judaism, but it could be anything really. And it was like kind of disheartening for me. And I very also quickly realized like, this is why you don't talk about this with everybody, because you're going to start getting everyone kind of saying all these things to you. And, you know, for me, like I was really happy that I stood by my ground. And I'm not saying that like for everybody that you should be totally inflexible, and perhaps sometimes a friend makes a suggestion about something and like maybe you want to consider what they're saying, but certain things that you really feel passionate about, like for me, it was just, that was not part of my little non-negotiable list. Like one of the things I didn't use up on like, this person is shomer Shabbat and I'm attracted to them. It was like, okay, shoo-in, they keep Shabbat and I'm attracted to them. Now what are my other things that I'm looking for? So yeah, you don't like this culture thing that you're saying. I would say like, not to just like sort of bend and like become so malleable that you're just sort of looking for everything that everyone is telling you to look for. It's like, you know you, and you should do you, for lack of a better term, and like go for what you want, because what I wanted was like 30 blocks away from me and it was right here. So like it's there. And I think having a Devora or a married friend who can keep you in check with that, again, is super important, because you might like be saying some of those things where someone really does need to go like, just check in, like maybe that's not so realistic. But yeah, does that story kind of like?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just add a little, again, shared values really matters more than anything else. Somebody might be really fun to date and you're enjoying their company, but as soon as you think, oh, is this somebody I can marry and build a home with, you kind of know the answer right away, so move on. Something else that is sometimes underestimated, you want to marry, ideally, a kind person. After all is said and done, you want someone who's a good person who's going to be nice to you. So obviously there's different levels of kindness. That is something that maybe isn't going to be on your list, but you could look out for. How do they talk to the waiter? How do they speak about their friends? It's a beautiful thing to marry somebody who is kind and thoughtful. And that's definitely a key thing to be marriage material. So that's something that's
for sure.
A huge pro.
Yeah, Laura's saying kindness is her number one.
Love that.
Thing. Also, I know, I just want to throw this in on the flip side. Devora, I don't know how you feel about this, and I do like to pull in my little, I was like really into Dr. Jack. You guys, you should check him out.
Awesome.
Listen to some of his Torah anytime. I would like take notes. And for the girls, he actually said, he's like, there's also 3 things you should look for. Like, if you see this, run. And he said, if you see that the guy is jealous, if he's stingy, not like he wants to go to the sale at Bloomingdale's, but like stingy, and if he has a temper, he's like, get out, just get out. So take it for what you may, but.
Yeah.
So given what's going on in the world, and I know, you know, depending on what area you are, the country or wherever you are, there's certain restrictions on like going out to places and like gathering with other people and whatnot. And I know a lot of people, including myself, don't feel comfortable going into like many unfamiliar environments, whether it's like a certain restaurant or a certain area or crowded street or whatever it may be. What advice do you have for people who are looking to date and they want to be active and meet other people, but they're not okay with meeting in person? Like, is FaceTime or like Zoom dates, is that acceptable in your opinion?
It's funny. I remember when this all started, and that was a big question, like, how are people going to date, you know? And thank God, every time there was an engagement, it was like a little extra exciting. And it's definitely been happening. So yeah, be innovative. Listen, dating in person is always the best. So I know a lot of people basically have been discovering nature and parks and walks that they never thought about. It's actually much easier for, you know, you don't have to necessarily pay for an expensive meal. So that's in terms of that. And of course you could be, you know, socially distant to your comfort level. But phone calls and Zoom and FaceTime, completely acceptable. We shouldn't put things on hold, especially important things, because of a world pandemic. Just an interesting Jewish law component, you know, during the 9 days, which we just finished, it's considered a time of mourning. We're very serious. We don't eat meat. We don't go swimming. We don't do laundry. It's a very sad time. We definitely wouldn't have a wedding or anything like that. The only thing though that you would not push off is an engagement. Somebody wants to get engaged. It's so important. It should happen right away. Not on Tisha B'Av, but every other day. So do what you can with what's given to you and make the best of it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Also, Adam, I told this story like very quickly too the other day. I have a really good friend who said to me, I don't know what all you guys think, because obviously I didn't date during the pandemic. So I kind of feel a little bit like, who am I to say any advice about it? But my friend told me, she's like, for me, this has actually been great. She's like, I feel like we just were able to get down to like being a little, like have a proper serious conversation a little more quickly. And the dates, instead of them being like fancy schmancy and like putting on an hour's worth of makeup, or like the guy having to pick like what's the new coolest restaurant or whatever it is, she was like, the first thing we did was like, we went for a walk with his dog. And like the conversation you have going for a walk with a dog is like really different than the conversation you have when you have like 4-inch heels on and you're in Nobu. Like, it's just a different thing. So, you know, maybe like everything else that Hashem gives us, like you have to look at what is the light in the situation. And so when she said that to me, I was just like I loved her perspective on that. And I totally, again, I don't even want to pretend to understand what it's like right now to be in that situation, because I do think like from the empathetic standpoint, it's really difficult. But to try to just take what you can out of it in that regard. And to Devora's point, like, don't not date right now because of this. Like, I think it's really important to still do what you can, whether, like you said, Adam, it's a FaceTime thing, or you can figure out a way to coordinate and be socially distanced. I wouldn't just say like, let me wait until the pandemic is over. And so many people have gotten engaged during this time. Like,
so many.
Name like 4 people that I know in the last 3 months that have gotten engaged, which is kind of like a lot for this time, I think. So go for it.
Absolutely. Should we do one more question and then enter the casual?
Yeah, let's see if we have any questions. Do you have any, has anyone submitted any questions to Devora or Alyssa?
No, I think I covered whatever I got.
Let's see.
Guys, what do you want to hear from
You can also privately chat questions if you don't ask them publicly.
Oh, Ethan, you made it.
I'm sorry I was late. I was speaking of getting married, I was at a wedding this morning in Shabbat.
Oh, it was a wedding. I said you were at Shabbat.
There was a wedding, and then in Central Park, and then Shabbat at Rothschild on the Upper East Side.
Wow, very nice.
Back to beer
Who has
bones.
questions? Don't be shy.
I have one more.
Okay.
So if a friend recommends that you go out with somebody and you're initially opposed to it because you have like a feeling about that person that you don't know if they'll be right for you or not, is it the right thing to do? And to go out with them as a courtesy to that friend who recommended it to you? Or is it the right thing to just write it off and just say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable. This won't be for me. And you just think you know where things will head and you don't want to go down that road.
I would say neither.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
things.
Don't do your friend a favor, but do yourself a favor.
Yeah.
And find out more. Maybe they thought of it for a certain reason. Like what Alyssa was saying before. Feelings of why someone's not good for you is not enough. You don't know the person until you know the person. But no, don't go out just to do your friend a favor. I mean, if they nudge you and nudge you and nudge you and nudge you, maybe. but you're not doing anybody a favor. That's not your job as a dater. But do yourself a favor. And you know what? It came up for a reason. Let me look a little into it. It's not going to hurt you to make 3 phone calls, you know?
And what if somebody asks you out and like you're single and they're obviously single and you don't know like their entire story or what they're about, but you're very, very hesitant. Is it courteous to give someone that time and commit to going and spending an hour or two with them?
You have to do the homework part of it. Like you really need to, for me, like when I was set up with the ones that I was set up with, I found at least like, now you don't want to ask 100 people, but like I would find at least 1 or 2 other people to ask what they thought about that person. Like honestly, I did that with Bobby. Like which is funny because we went out on our own accord, and then he's next to me, by the way. But we went out on our own accord, but we also, while we were dating, were set up several times because people didn't know we were dating, which was like a separate thing. So people were like reaching out to myself and to Bobby, trying to set us up, even though we were already dating each other. And so, but when we did initially, like for the first time, I immediately called Devora and I was like, okay, who is this guy? Like,
and I told Alyssa, Bobby is the best.
Like, I love it. And I was like, but getting that kind, okay, so that's like a no-brainer when somebody, and I asked one other person and they were like, great guy, go. So like, I couldn't feel better about it, but you know, you don't always get, some people might have to think on it for a second or give you information, which is fine, but you have to do the research. So I would say, don't make a snap decision, especially if someone's trying to set you up. If it's on your own accord and you're not like totally sure about that person, I would say like we always should give the benefit of the doubt, but it's exhausting to give the benefit of the doubt in dating sometimes because you can listen to people's stories of going out with like 1 million people and it's like, how much benefit of the doubt should I give? So I think you do have to reach out and you have to ask, and it's not considered to be like I'm not an expert on every rule of Lashon Hara.
It's not considered Lashon Hara.
Ask this, not like you're allowed to say to somebody, if someone even calls you and asks you on somebody, like you don't need to start like saying every single thing in there of that person's life history if you know it, but to say a couple of things for a yes or a no, totally fine.
Totally. And I'll just add, I forgot what I was gonna add. Yeah, basically your hesitation is like a hypothesis. So do the research and then either you'll confirm it, you know, you think that this person's temperamental and then you found out they actually are temperamental, okay? So moving on. Or you're going to find out more and then you might become intrigued. So just bottom line is, don't go, exactly what Alyssa said, don't go on a whim, find out a little more, and you don't have to spend days and weeks, just a little bit more information. Now, I think what I'm sensing is it's hard, you're worried about saying no to the person. There's very like cordial, polite ways of saying no. You could say, you know, I'm looking into other things right now. I'm busy. Like, you don't have to be like, no, we're not well suited. Goodbye, Charlie. You know, you could be vague and say no and be respectful at the same time. But first, do the research.
Sounds good.
Stage 1 of research before you go on a date. Stage 2 of research, dating. Dating is you're getting to know the person to see if you can marry them.
And I also think that like if like the worst thing you could do to somebody is like ghost them and like not be very transparent with them. Like I just think that it's like somewhat cowardly, and like if you run into them, it just like makes you look like bad and makes them look like it's very awkward for them too. And I was sent a text message from a friend of somebody who said like it's been great getting to know you. I had a great time. I just don't see this moving forward. And like those 3 lines were like very clear cut and like very unhurtful. And I think that it's like, if people receive that transparency and that type of communication, hopefully they'll recognize it and they'll be able to move on. But like, they should also recognize that, like, wait a minute, like this person, not out of their way, but like had the courage to say something and like didn't want to waste my time and didn't want to waste theirs. And like, it's somewhat amicable.
Yes, I agree. Very important.
Yeah. And if you had a bad time, it's probably not the right thing to say, like, had a bad time. You just say,
No,
great
listen,
getting to know you.
only say something that'll be beneficial to the other person.
Right.
Clarity is very special, but you don't have to tell them that it was the worst 3 hours of my life. You know?
So really good question.
And one said, what's the worst thing to hear on a bad date? Recalculating. You know, remember the GPSs?
Or
and
was like asking a follow-up. Was that what you were going to read, Adam?
Yeah, that's a really good follow-up question. Yeah. You can read it, Alyssa.
So she says, so hi, Laura. How about when you announce those lines and they react badly?
Maybe it's a little bit of another indicator that Taka wasn't a good idea.
That's what I was thinking, but I also think, like, I hope this doesn't sound like rude, but it's just like, that's on them, because your purpose of your conversation is to do the right thing and to be, you know, polite and just to say, I appreciate whatever it was that we did together, the time we spent, but like, yeah, I don't see it going in this direction or whatever it is. And like Adam said, you're doing the kindness by not just, it's crazy that's considered a kindness these days, but it is, because people will just, like, I've heard these stories of like, you just never hear from the person again and they fell off the planet type of thing. So yeah, if the person's going to react that way, it's just a confirmation to you that, like, okay, imagine that person when he came home at 10 o'clock at night after he worked all day and didn't get a deal done, like, what is his reaction going to be to you then? You know, so.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, I have a private message.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Someone's saying, is it okay if I read the message without saying who it is?
I think so.
Just say yes or no to me. I think it's probably fine. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so just said, would you mind if I reached out to you sometime? Would love to hear more about your spiritual story / journey and how it led, or how it tied into and led to dating and marriage. If you don't mind, what's the best way to reach out? I'll give you my phone number here after. But
Good call. Alyssa's the best.
Yeah, I mean, obviously today was not about me sharing like an autobiography, but I think, I mean, some people who are in the community know that I had like a little bit of a wild ride, and the like very brief in a nutshell version of it is that I had known Devora for years. One of my friends, when I started becoming more spiritual and more religious, was like, you got to meet Devora, and we would like go hang out at Bagels and Co. and we would text and chat, but like I was, you know, in a different space doing kind of like my own thing and not really like around the Chabad YP community. And one morning I was actually over at another shul, and some girl that I barely knew said to me like, hey, Chabad is doing like this thing today. Do you want to come? I'm like, no, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. She's like, just come. That was the morning I met Bobby. So, you know, it was like I'm happy to share more for anyone who wants to hear more about everything. But yeah, I was in like a pretty, I guess, like I was going through a difficult time in my life. My mom had just passed away. And I think like when I keep mentioning this stuff about like your energy and like how you sort of like your relationship with Hashem, I really think that like, even though that was the worst, most devastating thing that could happen in my life, and God forbid on anybody should experience that, especially at a young age, in this weird way, like it opens up that challenge, like opens something up for me. And And of course I say that like my mom, you know, got straight to Shemayim and was like, I want that one for her. Like she built it more exactly perfect for me. So yeah, so always happy to share more, and I'll text my number into the group, and anyone can text me if you want to chat more. I love talking about that stuff because while not everyone needs to have some kind of explosion, like I don't want it to come across that way either, because God forbid it should be just very nice, smooth sailing for everybody in their dating journey. But yeah, I think that everyone kind of has their own thing. For me, it was that, and everyone's kind of got their own sort of thing. So always happy to just chat with anybody about that.
So everyone's welcome to hang out for as long as they want. But I just want to formally thank everybody for coming out. Chag Sameach again, and you know, want to personally give you all a bracha that you should find your bashert and everything else in your life that you want. And shalom bayis and health. And I know it's the middle of the day on a Wednesday, and we really appreciate you coming out. And Alyssa and Adam, go team, go! You guys are awesome. But
and
to hang out and talk more, I just want to say that.
Chag Sameach,